everyone, welcome to the Dyl Pickle Movie Network. I am Dylan Randazzo, and welcome to my review for Creed 3, which hit theaters just a few weeks ago. It's still in theaters, and it's a film that I have been waiting and waiting to tell you all about. This is happening as a series of videos for 2023 catch-up for movies that I haven't reviewed yet on the channel that I want to. And the reason I want to review these films is not only to tell you whether or not they're worth seeing, but in this case, tell you how much I freaking adore the art form of cinema and the idea of these emerging directors that are just knocking it out of the park. I mean, this film is a knockout. It's an easy pun to make because this is about boxing and fighting, but this film is an absolute knockout, and I'm about to tell you why. Creed 3 continues the storyline from Creed and Creed 2, following Adonis Creed, the son of Apollo Creed, but this is actually the first one without Rocky. This Creed franchise is a continuation of the Rocky franchise. Rocky is a franchise that is so beloved in my household. My family loves it. I love it. My dad basically raised me on the Rocky movies, and specifically the Rocky villains. I mean, the villains in Rocky, or the ones Rocky fights against, I should say, because a lot of them are layered and not just villains, but Apollo Creed being a great example, has a great arc. And I think this film especially delivered one of the best villains, and I'll get to it in a moment. But what I love so much about the Creed movies and the Rocky movies is that it is a drama, character drama first, and a sports film second. There is a lot of sports stuff. There's a lot of fights, a lot of training, a lot of the ins and outs of the business that you see in all these movies. But at its core, it's about the human soul and the human spirit and the relationships that these fighters have with one another, the ones that they're playing against, as well as their own families, their own beliefs, their own legacies. And the Creed franchise specifically has dealt with legacy so well. We had Rocky as a part of the first few movies, and now he is sadly not here. And there's a bunch of reasons why he is not in this movie that aren't necessarily pertaining to the story itself, but more so the production behind the scenes stuff. That's another video I can make entirely on its own. But if you want to check out more about why Sylvester Stallone isn't in this one, you can check that out. It's all over there on Google, wherever you can search for things, you can find all that information. But I was definitely worried going into this one to see how Michael B. Jordan would do as a first-time director. You know, he's been a great star of this franchise, but can he direct? And the answer is yes. And also how this franchise would go without Rocky, how it would stand on its own without its headliner. But I think these Creed movies have shown time and time again that there's a new headliner, and it is Creed himself. Rocky was a supporting figure in these past two movies, and while it is sad to see him not there, and you do feel a little bit of his presence missing, it's very quickly forgiven because this story has its own identity, its own journey, its own path that isn't so much tied to legacy. There's very few mentions of Apollo Creed, very few mentions of Rocky. There's a lot to do with Adonis and his mother, but a lot of that is specific to Adonis's story in his own personal growth rather than connecting himself to other franchise figures. And I love the other movies because they connect to the franchises, and Creed has such great nostalgia tied to it because you have Rocky in the central figure of this film. I still think Sylvester Stallone should have won an Oscar for that film. And then Creed 2, it deals with the events of Rocky 4, the film that saw Adonis Creed's father, Apollo Creed, die in the ring at the hands of Ivan Drago. We then got to see Victor Drago, Ivan Drago's son, face off against Apollo Creed's son, Adonis, in the ring. So there was a lot of great ties to past movies, but this is the first one where I really feel it stands completely on its own.
When I walked away from boxing, I walked away with some unfinished business.
You could watch this film without having seen any other Rocky movies and completely understand the plot, completely feel invested in these characters' stories, because these are about the characters we're seeing in this film and the journey we're seeing them take in this film specifically. The film starts off with Adonis Creed basically in retirement training other future fighters, and he is actually training the champ of the world. And then there's this big marquee match about to happen, and one of the fighters has to drop out for reasons that I will not spoil. And he basically has to find a replacement, and that's when his old friend Damien rolls into his life. His friend Damien, played by Jonathan Majors, who also has been on a roll lately with, of course, a few years ago, The Harder They Fall and Defy Bloods, but most recently, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. He is Kang the Conqueror in the MCU, and he's going to be in Magazine Dreams, which is a big hit out of Sundance, which is already getting some Oscar buzz for Best Actor. So he is having a moment right now, Jonathan Majors, and I alluded to it earlier, but he is absolutely phenomenal in this role. And him and Michael B. Jordan's back and forth is so amazing together.
We was like brothers.
There is a really strong, deep past with these two characters that has a little bit of mystery at first, but as the film goes on, you start to uncover different layers of this past relationship. It's very interesting because when sequels introduce these big plot developments later on, specifically involving past and backstory, it almost feels like sometimes you have to question, wait, why didn't we know this information already? Why would this information be kept secret? But they do a really good job in justifying why this specific relationship has been kept under wraps and why this person hasn't even been a name that Adonis Creed has talked about in his life when seemingly they were brothers. They started their paths in this fighting, love for fighting and boxing together. And you see how there's a little bit of a strain to their relationship, but there's also like a catching up on missed time type feel as well, to where Adonis gives his friend Dame that title shot. But then after that happens, you start to see that maybe some of the motives of Jonathan Majors' character Dame is a little bit more villainous than we expected. And you see Adonis himself having to step into the ring. And this is all stuff you can see from the trailer. You know, this ends with a fight between Adonis and Dame. But what I like so much about this film and a lot of the other Creed films, but especially this film, is that this fight is a fight to kind of resolve all of this tension that is essentially built up for years and years and years. And that's kind of what Creed 2 is dealing with too, dealing with kind of fighting the past and fighting the demons that have haunted you. And this one deals even more so because I feel like in Creed 2, Adonis was almost fighting his father's demons because his father was the one who was a victim of Drago, to where he was kind of avenging his father. Here, I feel like Creed is fighting for himself and trying to fight basically the past that is haunting him as this new figure arrives into his life. And I really love that fight as a metaphor for life, and essentially the fight meaning so much more than just the entertainment and just the sport of it all. And that's why it's also so brilliant that Michael B. Jordan in that final fight at one moment makes the audience disappear to where it's just Dame and Adonis in the ring fighting against one another. And you really start to see that this is all about the two of them and their heated rivalry, essentially, that they've built out of a friendship that turned sour. And you start to see that it doesn't matter what the crowd is thinking, or even that the crowd is there. All that matters are the two people in the ring, because this is such a personal fight. And I really love that Michael B. Jordan literally illustrates it with a metaphor. Some people I know came out of the theater like, oh, that was so weird that they kind of made it almost like this fantasy sequence where the a crowd disappears and it's just the two of them alone in this ring. But I really liked it because it did illustrate that fight. And again, this is all stuff you can see in the trailer. I'm not going to spoil specific plot beats because there are so many other beats. You really see how this relationship evolves for better or worse. You also see a lot with Michael B. Jordan's Adonis Creed and his family members, his wife, played by Tessa Thompson, his daughter, Amara, who I'll just say now, if we don't get an Amara movie 10, 20 years down the line, I think it's a missed opportunity because these movies are making a lot of money, especially this newest one is making a lot of money. I don't see why the franchise wouldn't follow it up with a story with Amara, his daughter. His daughter is deaf as well, so that offers another really interesting lens to the story because now you have this story of deafness. And I always appreciate stories about deafness, especially portraying deafness in a positive light, or at least a light that is empathetic. I mean, Sound of Metal, Coda, there's a lot of great films out there that I think deal with deafness and hearing loss in a respectful way. And Creed 3 is another one that does so, even more so to where it really isn't a central uh, conflict. There is no conflict with her being deaf. It's just a way of life. And these characters just are natural about the way they communicate to one another. And it's so refreshing to see in a blockbuster where deafness doesn't feel like this big, like, terrible story plot, like something that has to be fixed or navigated around in a complicated manner. It just is a way of these characters' lives, and they never really draw attention to it. That just is their way of communication. And I really, really like that. I think this film is doing so much. And the thing I like most about Michael B. Jordan's direction is not the enthusiasm behind the bigger sequences, but instead the patience and restraint in the smaller stuff. And I really think with a first time director, sometimes you'll see, especially a director who's been in the business doing other things like acting, or like stunt coordination, for example, like to step into the director's circle I feel like sometimes directors want to go so big, so strong, and want to like just come out the gate swinging. And there are moments of this film that do that, but I feel like sometimes it can become a little bit overload to where you need to like kind of pump the brakes. Whereas here, I think Michael B. Jordan really understands the piece and understands that this is a character piece first, because the moments where the characters are just talking and kind of at a whisper volume are some of the most impactful and almost adrenaline inducing sequences in the entire film. There's a sequence with Dame and Adonis in a diner that's really great. There's a party sequence where there's a little some smaller interactions. There's a lot of great interactions with Adonis and Tessa Thompson's character, and especially there's some amazing use of photography and how these conversations are framed. There's very little editing in some of these sequences. It's just the actors talking to one another and the camera staying still on them. There's a great shot where Adonis is talking to his wife in the bathroom, and you see kind of his reflection in the mirror, but not him, but you see her and you see the mirror with her. It's really, really interesting photography and really interesting directorial choices. It's very clear that Michael B. Jordan comes from an acting background because he seems like an actor's first director. It seems like he really wants to get to the character moments and really get to the interactions and what the backstories and objectives are for these characters. And I think it really shows and it really strengthens the film, honestly.
Now we past talking.
Then maybe you just have to find him.
I would go as far to say as this is maybe next to the original Rocky and the original Creed, probably my third favorite in the entire Rocky franchise, the entire Rocky Creed franchise. And I think it's because Michael B. Jordan just understands those character moments so well. And we're so invested in these characters, all the big characters and all the small ones. There are small little bit roles here and there, even past characters from this franchise, like other fighters, just miscellaneous fighters, all get little moments to where you really feel their genuine empathy and their genuine personalities. And there's stuff that happens to all these characters that you can like really resonate and feel with. And of course, the final fight is that kind of swing for the fences. This is my directorial debut. I'm going to go for it. I mean, Michael B. Jordan has said that his final fight is largely inspired by anime influences and Naruto and all that and all those things. So it's really exciting to see just that different energy come into the ring because you can only make a boxing match different so many ways, but Michael B. Jordan still finds a way to make it different. And I think that's a big credit to all the people involved, not just Michael B. Jordan behind the camera, who is excellent, but also the cinematographer, Kramer Morgenthau, really deserves a lot. And the editors, Tyler Nelson and Jessica Baclise, they're really putting in the effort to make this feel fresh, but still make it feel nostalgic for a certain crowd, but also make it new for people who may have not seen the other films. I know people at my screening who hadn't seen the other Creed films even, but are still able to fall in love with this story and leave with tears in their eyes because this film itself on its own is able to inspire so much. And I think that really is a testament to this entire franchise because I really don't think there's a single film in the Rocky franchise or Creed franchise that you can just dismiss. I know there are not great films, but even the films that aren't great either have great fights or they have some great relationships or they just have memorable moments that are so bad they're good. You know, I think all the Rocky films are memorable in some way, but especially these Creed films have just really been knocking us out punch after punch after punch. I didn't even love Creed 2 because I didn't love necessarily how tied it was to the past Rocky franchise. It almost felt a little too overly nostalgic, but I think when I watch them back, I'll like them even more because these characters are so well written, so well developed, and I just love the trajectory this story has been going on. That being said, I think this is a really good stopping point for Creed's character, specifically for Adonis Creed. That being said, like I said, 10 years down the line, I would love to see a story about Amara. I would even like to see a spinoff with Dame, with Jonathan Majors' character, because Jonathan Majors has such a great hulking presence in his physicality, but also such a calmness, almost charm that works really well for these villain characters he's playing. Because both Kang in Quantumania and this character in Creed 3, Dame, have this charisma to them that kind of precedes their evil. And I think that's what makes their characters so interesting and so scary and haunting. Essentially, this is a scary film when Dame is in that ring because Dame does not pull punches, and I don't want to spoil what he does in the ring, but it's terrifying. And I think some of the best Rocky movies are because the villains are terrifying. Literally, Drago knocking out Apollo in the ring to death, and Mr. T in that third movie. Like a lot of these, Apollo himself, a lot of these villains have made the movies, and I feel like this is another case scenario where the villain does make the movie, the antagonist does make the movie, but I also think the direction is so strong, the acting is so strong. B. Jordan just nails it both directorially and performance wise. I really think this is one of the greatest films we'll see all year, one of the greatest sports films, one of the greatest black stories we've seen put to film. Like, I really do think this has it all, to where I don't think there's many flaws, except maybe I would have liked to see Rocky. But then again, the fact that it can stand alone without Rocky, and I really don't care that he's not there, to the point where I'm watching it and I'm not thinking the whole time, oh, where's Rocky? Where's Rocky? Is really a testament to this story, because we've been seeing a lot of people have had complaints, even with Scream 6, which I'm going to review tomorrow, actually, that Nev Campbell's character isn't there anymore, Sidney Prescott, and how that feels, kind of passing that torch. And just other franchises, when they start to like either kill off or just send off these legacy characters. Even the MCU, people have felt a certain way about the fact that we've kind of lost a lot of the main core Avengers, either to death or retirement, or going back in time to age themselves to look like Joe Biden. Like, I really think the legaciness of these legacy sequels, some people have qualms with them, but I think everyone who watches Creed 3 is going to enjoy it, because it is on its own just a really damn good time. So that's my review for Creed 3. As I said, I am doing catch up this week, so tomorrow I will be bringing you a review for Scream 6. Does Scream 6 stand on its own without Sidney Prescott the way Creed 3 stands without Rocky? You will have to find out. And then Shazam 2, which I will be reviewing on Friday. And then, of course, a lot more reviews coming throughout the year. I want to get really good about giving you reviews for everything I see in 2023. And some of those will also be on the Dyl Pickle Podcast, where you can find this review and so many more, where I will be putting all my videos on podcast form. And of course, I want to thank all my lovely friends and colleagues and fans here who have donated for the 24-hour subathon and have gotten their names shown here. They are a great help in helping building this channel and building my overall mental happiness and sanity as well, by ensuring me that I'm doing a good job, or at least a job that is worthy enough for them to feel like they are obliged to reach out and help out, and it does not go unnoticed. So everyone, stay tuned for those reviews. Thank you so much for watching this review, and if you've seen Creed 3, let me know in the comments how much you loved it, and if you didn't love it, what did you think of it? Because there are some detractors for every film, but I really do think if you haven't seen it, you're going to really enjoy it. And if you're worried that you haven't seen any of the other Creed films, I assure you, I think this one will hook you in no matter what. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.